Hello everybody, this is Girthquake here, and I am here to talk to you about my first Borderlands 4 build, DOT Shot Amon. Now, before we get into the build, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Mobalytics for providing the community with this excellent build planner. They have put together a website and they have gathered some of the most intelligent creators in the community. Definitely not me, obviously. That's not why I'm saying we're intelligent. But yeah, they got a whole bunch of smart people together to put a whole bunch of really good builds on this website. They are all available. They link you to YouTube channels. They have build planners for you to create your own builds, and you can even browse the other creators' setups that we create as we come up with them. We have rough drafts on here. We have final drafts on here. This is my first fully fleshed out build that I'm publishing and attaching to a video. I will have links to this in my Discord. I will have links to this in the video. I will make sure all of these things are interconnected, so if anybody wants to learn the workings and mechanics of DOT Shot Amon, you can. The math will always be available in my Discord. There's quite a few of those intelligent people I mentioned earlier working around the clock to make sure all this information is accurate. First off, I want to give a huge shout out to those people. Prismatic, huge shout out to those people. Prismatic, CZ47, both of them have been working on some of the information that I used to create this build. Ritor for doing all of the math testing that he's been doing as well. His bloodshot skill damage shenanigans are what got me here. So I figured I could recreate it, and I was able to. And then, of course, Buckets of Woe for always helping me with any little math issues I decide to send you. And with that, we will get right into the build. So DOT Shot Amon. It is a very high actions per minute build. It's a fast-paced mobber. It is a bit of a toss-up with bossing. It can either do all of the damage in the world. I have hit for millions of damage in one single instance with this setup. That's not always going to happen though, because some of these skills are based on chance. The other issue is that not all bosses like to stay as still as the test dummy. Let's be real here. However, that said, you aren't going to see 10 million damage shots out of this consistently just because, well, that takes some setup. Like I said, the boss needs to stay still for that. But 1 million? 2 million? Oh, you can do that. You would easily hit for millions of damage and one tap whatever fleshy boss that you see. It does struggle a tad when it comes to bosses that you don't have the element for. I personally have a strong shock weapon here, and the skills provide the fire damage. The only time I lack is when I'm up against Radix, because Radix is stupid. However, that said, as soon as I can get myself a corrosive launcher, Radix will die. We don't have save editors yet in this game, so even us theory crafters are stuck farming for the gear. So you will notice that in the gameplay, some of the gear I'm using isn't top-notch. It isn't save-edited gear. I'm actually using a blue MacLeod shotgun in this build. That is just goes to show you that this is mechanics all the way down. You don't need god rolls for this. You don't need any of that, luckily. The hardest thing to find here is going to be the MacLeod enhancement. That does kind of suck, along with getting the actual MacLeod shotgun itself. It's called a Stellium. It shoots a slow-moving large orb. The reason this is the gun of choice for this build is because of the massive dot damage it provides. And that is how we mob with such little gun damage on Amon. Now, to be clear, this build does not open up until you get specializations going. You need a little bit of extra gun damage, you need a little bit of extra ordnance damage, you need a little bit of extra skill damage to get the bossing damage up. However, the mobbing damage with the dot weapons I mentioned doesn't benefit a whole bunch from the specializations tree, so you can really get right into that. Now, without wasting too much more time on the general about of the build, let's get into the really core mechanics. So like I said, you are applying a large shock dot, which will then apply a large fire dot with Amon's skill, Electrical Fire. So that's all you need to do for mobbing. That's really it. The enhancement that applies 100% status effect chance to your MacLeod weapons after reloading is what we're gonna abuse here to constantly make this happen. Right here, what you're seeing, electrical fire dots on every single enemy we see. Now, that isn't all it does. You're gonna need more than just high dot damage to have a build. That's obvious. So what you bring into the equation on top of that is ordnance. Ordnance is fun. Ordnance does all sorts of things. The mobbing ordnance of choice is Slippy. Slippy has a neat little interaction with Amon's skills. This skill right here, Fist of Stone. It's not a very complicated interaction. Melee attacks, dealing melee damage restores a percentage of Forge skill cooldown. So you throw a bunch of Slippies out there and you get your Forge skill back very quickly. Now, the Forge skill we will be using would have been Molten Slam. However, we take the right side capstone for Stormcutter. Stormcutter will regenerate your action skill duration and give you action skill cooldown restoration when you damage enemies. So all you really need to do is damage about 4 enemies. Now, that doesn't get you to the 100%, but usually the time will cover that bit. But yes, once you damage those 4 enemies, you will almost always have your action skill up and running. It doesn't matter how big they are, how small they are, if they die or if not. None of it. As long as you nick them with this Stormcutter, you can get Onslaughter back very quickly. Onslaughter's biggest issue is cooldown and applicability. Now, we're not really using Onslaughter for damage itself. What we're doing is using it to give us access to Force of Nature, which is how we boss. Force of Nature is a double dip detonation. What it does is takes the stacks of gun damage that you apply, or I'm sorry, not the stacks of gun damage. Gun damage applies stacks to it. That is damage dealt, 100% of damage dealt. At 10 stacks, that's the max. You can then apply a detonation by either dealing melee damage or killing the enemy. That means if you build these stacks up and then you hit them with Stormcutter, they explode. Now, it seems all right. You know, that isn't what makes the build though. We expand on this because what ends up happening is Dragon's Breath makes your shots skill damage. Follow me? It amps your shot and also makes it skill damage and fire damage. So, those things apply to your Dragon's Breath shot. The Force of Nature explosion is skill damage, or action skill damage. I'm not 100% sure yet. It might be action skill because I have created large Raging Inferno dots with it. But anyway, skill damage buffs it. So this is skill damage, and it leads into this double dip of skill damage. This is fire damage. This is fire damage. So, Dragon's Breath really synergizes with Force of Nature because it's an amp too. Keep that in mind. This is not bonus damage. This is an amp. And Force of Nature only accounts for your gun damage. It will not account for bonus damage on top of your gun damage, which Dragon's Breath covers because, again, amp. So, again, now we have this little loop here. That's great. We're going to come back to that loop because that's not the whole build. I mentioned Electrical Fire earlier. That's down here. You know, you just use these skills to grab that. It's a one-pointer, easy peasy. Moving to Blue Tree, the Thrill. This is going to heal you. Tail of the Comet. Your Slippies will apply Fat Cryo Dot. So we're going to use the hell out of this because it's a very strong skill and it can apply from each hit. And since dots can stack up to 20 times, the multiple hits from Slippy can possibly apply a very large dot. Now on top of that, there are other spicy ways to apply this dot, namely rockets. I know Ancient Rune is messing with a very fun build, by the looks of it, with rockets, scores, and all that. I'm sure that's going to be spicy as all hell. Now, I mentioned Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath can apply to your rockets. So, again, you get that skill damage onto your rocket, which is ordnance damage in its own, and also a gun. So now you can apply 3 different types of damage to your rockets because it's skill damage. And then when it hits, if it applies this Tail of the Comet dot, you have a second double dip coming out of the same shot. So now you have a Tail of the Comet dot coming from that rocket, and you have a Force of Nature stack. So the Tail of the Comet will dot the enemy, and then you send a Stormcutter their way, and you set off the detonation. Now, if you optimize this by following my instructions, one rocket can hit for 5 million damage on a force of nature explosion. That's one single rocket. That wasn't even an ideal rocket. That was some bullshit rocket I pulled out of my bank. The rockets are kind of crazy. It's a bit of a DPS rotation, so you will not be able to do this to everybody. That's what the Slippy is for. So that is that rotation explained. Real quick, get the let out for reload speed on your MacLeod shotgun. That's, I think, pretty obvious. See all this? These are explanations for all the skills. I typed all this up for anybody who wants to see. Mobalytics, again, excellent website. You see how all the skills are explained. Got little images. Really cool website. Weapon choices. This is what I put in there. The 2 MacLeod shotguns, the Stelliums. The complex root. Root's funny. Each projectile can apply its own dot, and the MacLeod status 100 enhancement accounts for that. So every single projectile will apply a dot. You can apply massive dots with high projectile count weapons if they have a dot to match. Sometimes the dot will reduce in size to match that projectile count, so the weapon is unbalanced. Jacob's pistol. This is specifically here because of the underbarrel vial attachment, the debuff you can apply to bosses. I would recommend sniper underbarrel, but it applies giant bright squares that blind you when you do it to bosses. Sucks. Triple bypass, 3 charges on an amp. I don't think I need to say more. Slippy, I love you. Your rocket would also go there. The heavyweight shield, this will buff your Stormcutter. It will buff Slippy. One thing to know about the heavyweight, the little text you see there, we called that the stinger, is because the heavyweight doubles all melee damage you do, but it is a straight double. It is multiplicative. And then once you empty the heavyweight, you're completely empty, that becomes standard melee damage. However, the 100% bonus you get when a segment is broken, the temporary bonus, that is mult. The Furnace class mod. This converts all of your forge skill damage into incendiary damage. We're really not, that's whatever. That doesn't make a difference to us. What we're really here for is the points in Dragon's Breath and the static incendiary damage buff, which is a double dippable stat for the Dragon's Breath force of nature loop. So that automatically comes with a 45% double dippable buff. It comes with points in Dragon's Breath, and it comes with points in Raging Inferno if they ever fix it. Real Big Fists. You're not going to get a ton of use out of the firmware here, but what Real Big Fist will give you, it will give you some extra melee damage. And you see that little 200% melee damage Nova at the bottom? Every once in a while you can make some fun things happen with that. It's not always, but just getting that extra melee damage for your fish, for your Stormcutter, that's helpful. High caliber, projectile speed for your shotgun. I don't even have these two yet. I just managed to get the Real Big Fist set. I still need to get these two, but looking through it, this is what I would pick if I could pick whatever I wanted. So projectile speed, reload speed. That is for your dot shotgun. This is for your skills. So the specializations, I said I would talk about these. Moxie recently released a video where he talked about how you can shovel gun damage into rockets because they're ordnance and guns. True. Same thing with miniguns. One thing not mentioned, though, is that rockets are also guns for your skills. And like I said, Dragon's Breath makes the gunshot skill damage. Bullet Train is gun damage from when you move. I'm a Gun is action skill damage from gun damage. Full Spectrum Arsenal is ordnance damage from gun damage. This gives you gun damage. This gives you ordnance damage from gun damage. This gives you skill damage from gun damage. Again, Dragon's Breath is skill damage, so it gets both of these when you use it on a rocket. Both of them at the same time. And Bear Arms for melee. It's there. This is interchangeable. You could always put Groundbreaker on that if you really wanted to abuse it. It is a dot build. It is tailor-made for that. Groundbreaker's busted right now, and I just didn't want to put it on. And that is really it for the explanation. I will have some gameplay up shortly. Here is the gameplay loop. If anybody would like to pause it and read what I typed here, I'm not going to read it all out because you were about to see it.
It shakes the earth!